you know what time it is? Do you know what time it is? Of course we know what time it is. It's Tim. It's New York Giants Straight Talk. Oh, bringing you a Friday episode. See, I got the date right this time. Want to talk about a couple things today. Also have the On the Mic segment, with Anthony coming up as well. We got a couple other new segments that are going to be coming up in the near future. But you know what? I want to talk about Daniel Jones, my favorite topic. Everyone says I'm a Daniel Jones hater. Everyone says that I can't stand him, but no one ever wants to take a look at the fact that I speak the honest truth. I talk about facts and statistics, and I think it's funny that people that are supporters of Daniel Jones always go with facts and statistics. They use that to say, this proves this is what Daniel Jones is. This proves that this is what he is, and this is what he is to the team. But as soon as you break down facts and statistics that are detrimental to their argument, the argument then is at that point in time, well, statistics don't mean anything. Don't mean everything. They don't tell the whole story. So you know what we're going to do? We're not only going to talk about statistics, we're going to talk about facts. And this is how we're going to get into this, and this is how we're going to do this, have this conversation. This is going to be strictly facts. This is not going to be based off of I'm going to say emotion or anything else. And one of the things I want to talk about immediately is the NFL rankings came out on NFL.com for the quarterbacks for the 2022 season. And I was reading the rankings, and I've seen it all over Twitter, where a lot of people are like, these rankings just don't make sense. These rankings are terrible. And I think to myself, well, why do they think this? What's the reason or what's the rationale for them thinking that these rankings don't work out? And then I noticed that Daniel Jones is 18th on the list. If you go through the list and you go through it subjectively, and that's what we're going to do. We're going to go through the list subjectively right now. You have Patrick Mahomes at number 1. You got Jalen Hurts at number 2. I got no problem with any of that. You got Joe Burrows at 3, Josh Allen at 4. You have Justin the Duck Herbert at 5. I have no problem with that either. You have Trevor Lawrence at 6. You have Tua from Miami. I think Tua's a little high at 7, but I do think he's in the top 15. 3,500 yards, over 3,500 yards, 25 touchdowns, 8 interceptions. Had the injuries, had the concussions, so I think he's a little high at 7, but I do think he's within the top 15. You have Jared Goff. Jared Goff, man, I made fun of Jared Goff unmercilessly, and for a while now. But then he completes 65% of his passes, 4,438 yards, 29 touchdowns, 7 interceptions. So he's good at 8. You got Geno Smith at 9, 4,500 yards, 32 touchdowns, 12 interceptions. You cannot argue with Geno Smith at 9. You got Tom Brady at 10. Yeah, Tom Brady should still be in the top 15 last year, but I think 10 might be high. You got Dak Prescott at 11. Don't have a problem with Dak at 11. Only played in 14 games, 66%, 3,371, 28 touchdowns, 17 interceptions. Interceptions were a little high. Eli Manning-esque on the interceptions ratio. And remember, this is the regular season. This is not the playoffs. So let's take a look at that. You got Lamar Jackson at 12. You got Justin Fields at 13. I think 13 is a perfect spot for Justin Fields. Justin Fields, to me, I think Ryan Poles is going to keep Justin Fields. I think he's going to trade that number 1 pick overall because I think that Justin Fields has the talent. He has that makeup. He has the ability to rush for over 1,143 yards, another 8 touchdowns, threw for 2,242 yards with 17 touchdown passes, 11 interceptions, had statistically a better season outside of passing numbers than Daniel Jones, but for some reason, Giant fans think that he's not going to be anything in this league. I don't know. Find that interesting, but I have no problem with him at 13. I got no problem with Aaron Rodgers sitting at 14. Have no problem with Brock Purdy, who only started 12 games at 15, 1,900 yards, 16 touchdowns, 4 interceptions, 37 yards rushing, only 1 fumble in a partridge in a pear tree. I have no problem with him there. Kyler Murray, I have a little bit of an issue at 16, but he should still be within the top 20, 11 games, 2,368 yards passing, 14 touchdowns, 7 interceptions. Kirk Cousins, I think actually should be a little bit higher than 17 with his 66 percentage completion rate, 4,820 yards, 31 touchdowns, 14 interceptions. I have no problem with that. And then you have Daniel Jones sitting at 18. Now there are 32 starting quarterbacks in the league, 32. And he's sitting at 18. And I've said this a million times before. And like I said, this is somewhat biased because it does come from another thing. But when you have 18, you're sitting at 18, you're saying there's only 14 quarterbacks who were not as good as Daniel Jones last season. So there's 32 teams. 16 would, if he was sitting at 16, that's average. That's league average. So he's sitting there at 18, which to me is statistically, you're looking at it, is a little bit below league average. So then you go on, you see Ryan Tannehill behind. Now, Ryan Tannehill is always compared to Daniel Jones. Everyone talks about how they're very similar. Ryan Tannehill, of course, only played in 12 games, 2,536 yards, 13 touchdowns, 6 interceptions. And then below him, you have Jimmy Garoppolo, you got Jacoby Brissett, you got Matthew Stafford, injury. Derek Carr, I think Derek Carr should be within the top 20 with his 3,500 yards, 24 touchdowns, and 14 interceptions with the dysfunction that has been going on with the Los Angeles, Oakland, Las Vegas Raiders. Then you got Andy Dalton, you got Kenny Pickett, and you got the likes of Jameis Winston, Marcus Mariota, Deshaun Watson, let's see here, Mac Jones, Russell Wilson, Trey Lance, and Teddy Bridgewater. I have no problem with the list because, like I said, it's ranking the quarterbacks from 2022 in their final statistics. I have no problem with that. And I think the list is pretty fair. But if you look at it from a point of being fair, Daniel Jones is in the middle of the pack. And people have said to me before, name me 10 quarterbacks that you would take over Daniel Jones. And really, there seems to be 17 quarterbacks that other people have taken over Daniel Jones, and there's a couple of quarterbacks that are below Daniel Jones that I would also take over him. Because I've said it before, there's nothing wrong with being an average NFL quarterback. There's nothing wrong with that. I mean, hell, people, like I said, Ryan Tannehill, Kirk Cousins. But when you are looking at an average NFL quarterback and you want to pay him $35 million a year, that's kind of where I get a little confused. And you look at it and go, okay, he had one okay season. And if you look at, and everyone talks about the game-winning drives, and honestly, if I just did a video with Mike Too Nice the other day, and you should go on this channel and watch it, because Mike breaks down what Daniel Jones did statistically on those game-winning drives. And I'm not going to ruin it because of the fact that it's in that video, so you should go watch it on Mike Too Nice's channel. But it wasn't impressive. So if you feel that Daniel Jones is your starting quarterback, if you feel that Daniel Jones is going to move you into that upper echelon or move into that next level, you're going to pay him. But the problem is, we've talked about this before, there is no middle ground in reference to the salary cap. There's no middle ground. There's some quarterbacks making 40, maybe one or two in that mid-level, and then everyone else making under 8. And you look at this and you think to yourself, okay, with Daniel Jones, how are we falling into that rationale that he is worth $35 million? And the $35 million number is being bandied about. I personally think it's $35 million average over 5. Because if you're going to sign him back, you're going to give him hopefully a bigger signing bonus in year 1, give him less of a salary hit in year 1 as well, and separate that money guaranteed wise through 2 and 3. And like we did on Leonard Williams' contract, you give him the big nut in year 3. That big chunk of change. The only problem is, we've talked about this. That year 3 is Andrew Thomas's year. So if you swing and miss on Daniel Jones and you give him that big contract, you are screwing your cap in year 3, and you're also potentially screwing your opportunity to give the money needed for Andrew Thomas. I'm just throwing that out there. But like I said, everyone says you can win with Daniel Jones. You can win with Daniel Jones. And you know what? They won 9 games last year. Everyone wants to talk about the 6-1 start, but nobody wants to talk about 3-7-1 following that. We don't want to talk about that. We want to talk about the good, but you don't want to talk about the bad, because it does not feed into your argument of why Daniel Jones is the quarterback of the future. I never begrudge a player for getting his money. Never do. Because of the fact that careers are too short in the NFL. You have like a 4-year window? And, so you have to get paid when you can, but you can't get paid when you can at the detriment to the salary cap. And I love when fans say, he should take less to stay with the team. Why? If you are doing well at your job and you have X amount, you're making X amount of money, and your boss comes to you and says, hey, listen, you're doing great. Now, I gave Johnny a $20,000 raise. I'm only going to give you a $10,000 raise, but you're doing more work than Johnny. You're better than Johnny, but you're only getting $10,000 more. And he's getting $10,000 more than you. So you should just be happy with that. No, these are people that are looking at not only from themselves as a career, but from their financial future. And I hate when fans say, well, they should just take less. Are you going to take less money at work? When you go to your job and clock in, are you going to take less money to be there? No, you want to get the most amount of money possible. But here's the issue with that. Doing that in the NFL is a little bit different. Doing this in the NFL, when people talk about the contracts, when people talk about the big money that certain players are getting, we've gone over this. The problem is that some of these players have earned that money over time. They've earned that money because what they did statistically. That's how they've earned that money. It's not just they did one great season and they got bucks and then they got paid. Everyone compares, everyone says, well, Daniel Jones is just as good as Ryan Tannehill or better. And I love it because if you think about it, you ask Giant fans, would you like Ryan Tannehill on your team? Do you think he can win you a championship? The answer is no. But for some reason, Daniel Jones is just as good or a little bit better than Ryan Tannehill. But Ryan Tannehill can't get you over the hump. Ryan Tannehill can't win you that big game. And then people are going to look at it and say, well, Ryan Tannehill gets paid a very large amount of money to be average. And I love it because let's just go back and we're going to pull up Ryan. I have all the statistics, or I have all the contracts for quarterbacks going back to even the quarterbacks that have been, made the most amount of money in their entirety in this league. Right now, the Ryan Tannehill's average salary is $29 million, which is probably where Daniel Jones wants to be or where the team wants to have him at, which is fine. But if you look at the Ryan Tannehill contract, the cap hit was only $22 million that first year because he got a base salary of $17, a signing bonus of $5, where you probably need to be with Daniel Jones. This is the perfect structure in some ways for this contract. Then what happened is in year 2, his cap hit was only $11 million because he only got $1 million in base salary, another $5 million in signing bonus, and he had to restructure another $4.6 million. So then you look at the fact that year 3 came in, that's where he hit his big number. That's where he hit his $38 million number. And then in 2023, it's going to be a $36 million number. Right now, the Tennessee Titans are panicking because they have a quarterback who's just as good as Daniel Jones or average, who's making $38 million against their cap, who make $38 million, and now is going to make an additional $36 million. And the one thing they don't tell you is he's got 2 dead cap years in 2024 and 2025 for $4.6 million apiece during that restructure because of the fact that that restructure was needed to sign players. They had to get rid of A.J. Green because of salary cap issues because of the Ryan Tannehill contract. And we've talked about this before. A lot of people use Ryan Tannehill as the litmus test for Daniel Jones. Ryan Tannehill still has been in this league and threw for over 33,000 yards, 212 touchdowns, and 108 interceptions. He's averaging about 3,500 yards passing and 23 touchdowns for his entire career, which goes back to 2012. Ryan Tannehill did not get his big money payday until, for quite a while though, because if you look at his career earnings, 17 is when he made the most substantial amount of money, which was at $17 million, which was with the Dolphins. And then that following year, he made another 17, and then he went over to the Titans where he took a lesser contract that first year. Like I said, in 19, only made 5, and then he goes through the 21, 22, and 23 season where he started making the money. But the question has always been, statistically, can you win with Ryan Tannehill? Can you get to the Super Bowl? And the answer to that technically has been no. But you're paying him like he is an upper echelon quarterback, which at this point in time is ruining your cap and not allowing you to do what you need to do to make a leap forward for a team that had a championship window going back to 2020, who has not done anything exponentially since because of the fact that they are hamstringed by their quarterback. The Philadelphia Eagles, the Cincinnati Bengals, and teams like that have shown you the way. You win on a rookie quarterback deal within those first 4 years because after year 5, you're going to get screwed. Patrick Mahomes is an aberration because of the fact that he's otherworld talent. And he deserves to get the money that he is getting. Now, I also laugh because a lot of people say, well, you know what? He's better than Kirk Cousins, Daniel Jones. And I'm going to pull up. I have Kirk Cousins' entire contract value as well. Hold on. I got to pull up Mr. Cousins' contract value as well. I probably should have did this ahead of time. This is probably why I get in trouble all the time. But let me do this one. Let me do this one more time. Let's look at Mr. Cousins, not only statistically comparable to Daniel Jones, but salary wise comparable to Daniel Jones. And I've already done this. And of course my internet's taking forever. If you take a look at Kirk Cousins was a 3rd round draft choice. So he was never getting that early money from the Washington team, because they also took RG3 that same year. He was kind of a weird backup plan. Now, Kirk Cousins, statistically, if you want to compare him to Daniel Jones, there's no comparison. Kirk Cousins was already thrown for over 37,000 yards, 252 touchdowns, and 105 interceptions. Now, a lot of Giant fans will say, you can't win with Kirk Cousins. But if you look at his career statistically, because I know we don't like to look at stats, he's averaged over 4,000 yards since 2017. The only blip was in 19 when he had 3,600 yards. But he's averaged over 4,000 yards going back to 2017, and he's averaged 25.5 touchdowns a game and only 10 interceptions. And his team's record has been 7-9, 8-7, 10-5, 7-9, 8-8, 13-4. Now everyone says you can't win with Kirk Cousins. He only completes anywhere. He completed on average in 67% of his passes. So he averages over 27 touchdowns, 66% of his passes, and over 4,000 yards. But they can't win with him because he's not a good enough quarterback. Daniel Jones is a better quarterback. This is a guy that's thrown for over 37,000 yards and 252 touchdowns. And then you're going to say, well, you need to pay him statistically like, Daniel Jones should be statistically like Kirk Cousins, even though statistically they are not the same. Now, if you go into Kirk Cousins' contract going back to 2022, he had a $31 million cap hit that year. 2023, it's going to be $36 million. And then he's got 2 dead cap numbers for almost, for $12 million and $6 million the year following. And these are just dead cap years. But if you look at statistically, he has earned that money. He earned his $36 and $31 million, not just over a period, not just over 2 seasons or 1 season, but going back to 2012. Like I said, if you take a look at going back to you go back to 15 for Kirk Cousins, 4,000, 4,900, 4,000, 4,200, 3,600, 4,200, 4,200, 4,500 yards passing, 29 touchdowns, 25, 27, 30, 26, 35, 33, 29. These are numbers that are all world, are better than Daniel Jones. But the problem is people say you can't win a championship with Kirk Cousins. Okay, well, you got a guy who's probably going to could potentially throw for 50,000 yards and over 350 touchdowns in his career. But you can't win games with him. And Daniel Jones, who had 1 average season, who's not anywhere statistically comparable to Kirk Cousins, is better. This just makes you scratch your head a little bit. And if you go back to Kirk Cousins' career earnings, his big year didn't come until he got tagged, I believe, back in 16, which was $19 million. Then his salary was 19, 23, 22, 27. He had the signing contract where he got the $30 million bonus. He only had a $9 million salary, but he had a $30 million signing bonus. And then he had $21 million after that, and so on and so on. So he structured his contract in a way that the team could still be competitive in Minnesota. That's what he did. And that's what he did over these 11 seasons. And then I go back and I think a little bit. I think about some of the greatest quarterbacks in the history of the game. One of the quarterbacks that always comes to mind is Drew Brees. Drew Brees was a guy, when he was in San Diego, he was okay. Then he blew out his arm a little bit. Then he took that deal, the Saints, and he became all-world. He became the all-world quarterback. But if you look at what his salary was and what he did contractually, he took only 2 years, $50 million from 20 to 2021. He took from 2018 to 2019. He took again 2 years at 50. In 2016, he took 1 year at 24. 2022, he went to 2020. Excuse me, I should say 2021 to 2016. He took that 5-year deal at $100 million, which was an average salary of 40. So yes, I know some of these numbers are skewed because of the way these quarterback salaries are, but on average, he took less money And he was a better quarterback, and he'll probably be a better quarterback than Daniel Jones will ever be, to the fact that he took $25 million those last 2 years of his career so he could help the team also win. Now, no one can compare Daniel Jones to Drew Brees. But like I said, if you go back to 2016, he was averaging $24 million, if not less, contractually. And he was more than an average quarterback. So you want to take this cash and players like Drew Brees and say, okay, well, Daniel Jones in some ways is better than Drew Brees because we're going to pay him more than Drew Brees. Even though statistically we know that's crazy. The one thing I always go back to is the Eli Manning contract. Eli Manning made $252 million throughout his entire career. It was that last contract that killed him. That was that last 4-year, $84 million contract, $31 million signing bonus, $21 million average. And again, like I said, I don't begrudge him on that because of the fact that Mara has a tendency of not wanting to get rid of guys. And one of the things I loved about Wellington Mara and George Young, that when the hard decision needed to be made, the Giants moved on from players. They moved on from Phil Simms in 93. They moved on from Lawrence Taylor. They moved on from Joe Morris. They moved on from Mark Bavaro because they knew that their salaries were not going to equal their production. And that's a detail I think the Giants should learn. And John Mara didn't learn that from Wellington because John Mara gave the 4-year, $84 million to Eli from after that 2015 season, which again hampered and strung out this team for having a bad period of time because they were paying more for an average quarterback and they were overpaying for an average quarterback. That's what we need to look at. And those are actually the facts. You look at and you compare statistically to what Daniel Jones is in the league, he falls in the middle of the league. He falls anywhere between 18 to 23 in reference to quarterbacks. You are going to take a swing and hope. You hope and I'll hurry. You're going to take a swing and you're going to hope that he is going to progress in year 5. And I love it because I told someone in the comment section, I said, just tell me a guy in year 5 who took a Herculean jump that went to a Super Bowl. And I said, don't give me guys from the 80s and 90s because guys in the 80s and 70s, 80s, and 90s could sit there and they will sit there and they could sit for 4 years as a first round draft choice because they know they weren't going anywhere via free agency. So sometimes teams, especially in the 80s, would stockpile quarterbacks. You know, they always come up with Brad Johnson. And I point out the fact that Brad Johnson had a leap in year 3, and he was also on a team in Tampa that had a stellar defense. They won that because of him. So then they'll print out, they'll say Trent Dilfer. And I said, well, Trent Dilfer was in 2000, had an all-world defense. They'll say Geno Smith. I'm like, okay, Geno Smith's a one-off, and I don't think he's going to get paid like he thinks he's going to get paid because of the fact that teams are smart enough to understand that if you miss on this quarterback situation, it's going to be bad. But like I said, you need to think about this. And I love when people go Phil Simms. If one more person says Phil Simms, I'm going to blow a freaking gasket. Phil Simms in 79 was the Rookie of the Year runner-up to Otis Anderson. He was leading the team in playoffs in 81 when he got hurt. 82 and 83, he got hurt again. 84, he was the first Giant to throw for over 4,000 yards. 86, he won the Super Bowl. So yes, it was not the fact that he was not playing well statistically. It was the issue of him staying on the field via his injury. So that doesn't count. That doesn't count. I hate when people bring that up. But the thing is this, like I said, you have to look at this logically. And I hope some fans do that. And like I said, if you want to look at, and like I said, I hate it over and over again when people keep saying, well, we have 44 million, we'll probably have 50 million, we have the most. You have 50 million. Let's say we have 50 million, but the problem is you don't have a quarterback under contract and you don't have your starting running back under contract, which could potentially take up $40 million of your cap space. The Giants need to play smart, they need to think smart, and they need to be smart. And I have the faith in Joe Shane. I have faith in Brian Dable. And like I said, whatever they're going to do, they're going to do. But we have to wait and see what is done. We got the new segment coming up here called On the Mic. We have Anthony on the mic today. So you know what? Let's take a roll and see what happens.
All right, everyone. This is Tim. This is episode number 4, I think, of On the Mic. We have Anthony dropping in the zone here. Anthony, you know what? It's a pleasure having you on. And I'm curious because we've been trading emails back and forward. So I'm curious to see what your 10 minutes is going to be involving. And I'm going to give you the countdown right now. We're going to give you the 3, 2, 1. Your 10 minutes are on the mic.
All right, thanks, Tim, for having me. Big fan of the show. And for today's segment, I'm going to talk about the pros and cons of Daniel Jones, re-signing him,
Wait, there's
letting
pros?
him go.
So I said, wait, there's pros?
There are some pros. I'm going to
All
play
right.
devil's advocate here for you. All right, for the
All right.
fans.
You know what? I'm gonna shut up. Here you go. It's all you. I'm gonna shut up.
So now, pros. Let's go with Jones. He's a known entity, whether that's a pro or a con. He did show improvement this year. While some people overhyped the improvement, there was improvement with good coaching. And as we can see, good coaching really does affect the players. So I think, is this the peak of Daniel Jones? 15 touchdowns throwing, 7 rushing, 7 turnovers total. Is that the peak of Daniel Jones? Or is it the beginning of something new? We don't really know. He did improve. He did show improvement with leading his receivers the last few weeks of the seasons, albeit against inferior defenses. But he at least was leading the receivers. No receivers had to stop and get the ball. So, hey, maybe improvement. Right now, also the pro of keeping Daniel Jones is what's it going to cost to get a replacement? So now some people say go trade for a quarterback or sign a quarterback. You sign Lamar Jackson if he's available, you're looking at $40+ million a year. $40 to $45 million a year. That's what he's going to command. And or even signing someone like Derek Carr, 35 to 45 million. There's not a lot of options that fit the Giants' cap space for this year and the next 2 to 3 years. So that's kind of one of the pros of keeping Daniel Jones is he's probably going to be cheaper than signing another veteran, though not by much. So that's what some of the pros. The pros are also that he's well respected in the locker room. The players like him. Former players like him. So something does go for that. The cons. The cons are a lot longer. The cons are I don't think he is a true franchise quarterback. To me, the best comparison I can look at is Alex Smith with the Kansas City Chiefs. Alex Smith led into the playoffs, won a playoff game. He had 22 total touchdowns, about 700 rushing yards, 3,300 passing yards, the exact same sack percentage, and he had about the same quality offensive line as Daniel Jones. The Chiefs knew that was as far as Alex Smith could take him, and they went and they traded up for some guy, Patrick I don't know. Hasn't done anything in the league lately, especially not yesterday. And they knew the deficiencies. And Alex Smith and Daniel Jones are game managers who can occasionally rise to the top against a inferior team and drag his team across the finish line. But he cannot do it against superior. Case in point, 2011, Alex Smith against the New Orleans Saints. He dragged his team in the fourth quarter to beat them in the division round. He dragged them. And as I said, you cannot deny Alex Smith had an amazing game. Daniel Jones against the Vikings had an amazing game, helped drag his team to a win. Comes across a superior defense, all of a sudden looks very mortal. And the reason why I bring up Alex Smith is a good quarterback, but no one says Alex Smith is going to get me that Lombardi trophy. Daniel Jones, I don't think, is going to get us that Lombardi trophy. The cons of also Daniel Jones: 30 to 35 million with effective cap space of 44 million. It's not a lot. We got holes at center, guard, wide receiver, tight end, linebacker, cornerback. Heck, we even have a hole at punter if we don't re-sign the Scottish Hammer. We don't re-sign him. We got a hole at punter. So we got a kicker, a placeholder, and a left tackle. That's all we got right now this year. So my feeling is throwing $35 million at Alex Smith level of play when you have so many holes is not worth it. Now, looking at the draft, Giants are picking, I think, a 24th, and the reason why I was paying attention to the draft position is I look at two teams that traded up for quarterbacks, franchise quarterbacks. The Kansas City Chiefs traded from 27 to 10. Cost them 2 first rounders and a third rounder. And they got some guy. The Bills traded twice. They ended up trading away a first rounder, 2 second rounders, and a third rounder and a fourth rounder to, in essence, go from 24 to 7. The Giants, realistically looking at the teams, there's about 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 definite teams that want a quarterback, that need a quarterback badly. We're talking Houston, Indy, Carolina, Washington, and Tampa Bay. They got nobody. They need a quarterback, and they're all ahead of the Giants. Giants to trade up over them, it's going to cost them big. However, there's a lot of good quarterbacks, and I think there's some quarterbacks that can slip actually to the Giants in the latter half of the first round. Will they have to trade up with the Jets to go to 13 to maybe get a better quarterback? I could see that. I don't think it's going to cost that much because there's a couple of quarterbacks that you pointed out in Online Big Blue. New York Giants Sports Talk, Straight Talk, sorry. Don't want to get the brands mixed up.
Get it right. Get it right.
And
so listen, I get confused on my own, but go ahead.
I'm
you got 4.5 minutes.
I'm an honorary Gen Xer. I get things mixed up all the time with technology. So my feeling is I think the Giants could draft a quarterback without giving up the farm because I look at it this way. What do you value more, your draft picks or your cap space? And that's what it comes down to. What do you value more, your draft picks or your cap space? Both are unknowns. Cap space grows. And that's the thing that annoys me. Everyone goes, well, the cap space grows each year. We went up $15 million. Oh, you think no one else is going to be thinking that? You don't think every single free agent's agent is going to be saying, cap went up $15 million. I want an extra $2. You got Andrew Thomas. Right now, top left tackles are getting paid $24 million a year. Andrew Thomas, I think, is going to reset the market at 27, 28. That's going to be next year. Dexter Lawrence is going to be, rightfully so, getting Leonard Williams money. Going to reset the market. Those are 2 foundational pieces that you draft you don't want to let go. And you can't have Daniel Jones at 35, Saquon even at 10, Dexter at 20, and Thomas at 27. You just can't afford it. And why do I want to give up, an eighth of my cap space for Alex Smith? It's not worth it, in my opinion. If they could get him for 15 to 20, Daniel Jones, I'd say go for it 100%. But he's just not worth $35 million a year. Or as the guy who clearly his head is still frostbitten from the 2007 playoff game, he's not worth $50 million a year either. All respect to my Scottish friend over there. So that's my pros and cons. I think the Giants could easily trade up and get a pick, get a quarterback without sacrificing the farm. And honestly, 22 total touchdowns, 7 turnovers, less than 4,000 yards total between rushing and passing. That's worth $35 million. You pay someone $35 million a year for a C+. It's not worth it, in my opinion. So I feel the best move for the Giants to do is surround a new young quarterback with talent, sign a good center, sign some linebackers, draft some wide receivers, and make the team around him better because look at what the Eagles could do with a cheap rookie contract. They were able to build a juggernaut with the exception of a James Bradbury holding penalty, could have easily won the Super Bowl last night.
Which I think I think that's a call you don't make. But we'll talk. I'm not going to interrupt you. You got another minute 30.
But that's my feeling with Daniel Jones. I said there's good to him, and he showed progress. And if we knew the progress was going to keep going up and up, I'd say go right for it. But the Eagles straight up said, we know how to beat Daniel Jones. Take away his first 2 reads and just keep an eye on him. And this is the one thing that scares me. They said it's the same way with protecting going after Josh Allen. And Dable has used what he used with Josh Allen in the beginning with Daniel Jones. And that scares me that teams are starting to key in on Josh Allen, who's a physically superior quarterback than Daniel Jones in every aspect, and they're starting to beat him now. And when he goes against quality opponents with quality coaching, he is beatable, as Cincinnati showed, and it was not even close.
No whatsoever. You have another 40 seconds. You have anything else to wrap up? Because I got a couple questions.
As far as 40 seconds go, no, I'd rather dedicate the 40 seconds to your questions.
Well, I'm actually going to give you a little extra time because you said a couple. I was typing some notes. You said a couple things I want to address and some questions I want to ask. what would you classify yourself as what camp are you in the Daniel Jones camp? Are you in the I'm meh about it, or Daniel Jones isn't my guy? I mean, what would you be your classification?
I'm something of a centrist. I have so I see the logic in both arguments. I am more for the state of the franchise, not just next year, but the next 2 or 3 years. I am in the get someone new camp. However, I am a little bit
Okay.
higher on Daniel Jones than the move on from Daniel. Like, if this is the spectrum of Daniel Jones, this is where you are and you don't like him, and this is the lovers right over here. I'm like over here. I'm with you on getting rid of Daniel Jones, but I don't despise him as some in the camp may do so.
Okay. Now, my question, this is what I'm leading for the question. Giants select 25th. And let's just say, for argument's sake, I'm not a fan of Anthony Richardson, but there are a lot of people that are. I think he's a Kiwi Smith. I think he's Dwayne Haskins, RIP. But a lot of people are saying, you know what, give Daniel Jones, if he would accept it, kind of a lower end contract and draft a quarterback at 25 and have both on the team. Would you see that as any value in doing that for the organization?
I don't see any value for the organization because you're sending conflicting messages. You got Tyrod Taylor, who you signed as a backup for backup money. You're paying Daniel Jones starter money. And then you're drafting a quarterback with your first overall pick. Now, Sharon Rodgers over in Green Bay gets a little upset when someone questions him. And look what it did in Green Bay when they drafted Jordan Love. Now, when the Eagles drafted Jalen Hurts, why it's a different situation is Jalen Hurts was a second-round pick, and Carson Wentz was injured the previous year. So, as an organization, from a directional standpoint and from a talking standpoint, you could say, hey, we drafted a quality backup quarterback, and because our quarterback gets injured, we don't think Nick Foles is good enough to be quality. He wants more money. This way, you can kind of play both ends. You can't draft a first-round quarterback and say, Daniel Jones is our quarterback when he's at 25 years old. You know, Aaron Rodgers at least was 37 when they drafted Jordan Love, so you at least say, hey, we're preparing for the future. You don't even know what you want to do 2 years from now. Daniel Jones says, I want to play with the Giants. I want to be with the Giants after the awkward post-game reaction. He was saying all the right things. But is drafting a quarterback with the first round clearly states we're moving on from you. And why? I mean, if I were Daniel Jones, I would only sign a franchise tag for $35 million because my feeling is I want to get paid. If I'm only playing 1 year, I want it guaranteed if the Giants' plan is to move on from me. Daniel Jones, you could bet on yourself, sign a franchise tag, have a ball out, and then you move on and get an even bigger contract. But what I have a question for you is, your friend who's in the circles of the NFL before the season said no one viewed Daniel Jones as a legitimate quarterback. What do they say now? The executives still think the same thing?
We talked about this on one of the podcasts a while back, or not a while back, a couple of weeks ago, and he basically...
That's right.
Oh, you're getting the cut sign. He basically said outside of New York, the value for Daniel Jones is not as high, and it's more of the New York fan base than anything else. Everyone outside in the league sees his deficiencies. I actually spoke to someone that works currently with the Texans, and it was funny because I was joking with him, and I'm not going to name his name, I'm not going to say what he does, but we were joking. I said, well, you guys need a quarterback, you know, because you got David Mills. And he's like, and I said, you could sign Daniel Jones. And he was like, no, we're good. And I know he was being flippant about it, but it was, and I told people I was on FaceTime with him, but it was his expression that he was like, no, we're good. And I was like, well, you are in dire straits for a quarterback. You would rather draft a guy than turn around, than go after Daniel Jones, who's been in the league for 4 years. I think someone will pay for him on the marketplace, but I don't see him getting the cash that he thinks he's going to get when he hits the free agent market, unless there is a team that is quarterback desperate that thinks they can make the playoffs, and has the cap space, because the Saints are $40 million over the cap. They're already linked to Derek Carr, who's going to be released in a couple days because of the fact they're not going to, the Raiders aren't going to give him that $40 million guaranteed bonus, for the roster space. So, I mean, it's, I think someone will pay him some money, but I think someone said it best. And my friend who has been in the league for 30 plus years said right now the Giants seem to be competing against themselves for the Daniel Jones services, which is why they just reached out evidently to his agents within the last 3 days. That they haven't been in. They offered Saquon Barkley a contract during the bye week for $12.1 million. And then Shane was asked, hey, what about Daniel Jones? And he said, no, we haven't even talked to his guys yet. And he didn't even talk to him leading up to this. There was no preliminary discussions. I could tell you from sitting in some meeting rooms, especially with general managers, there are usually preliminary discussions. And from what it sounds like, the Giants haven't had them until recently.
I could see the Giants actually lowballing him an offer, like a $20 million to 25 with incentives for 3 years. Him rejecting it, and the Giants go, okay, bye. I could see Joe Shane doing that.
Yep, and I could see Joe doing that as well. But we have run well over. We've run 6 minutes over, but that's okay. Anthony, I appreciate you coming on the mic. It was a good segment. It was a fun segment. I'll give you 20 seconds for your final thought or to wrap it up. And then,
all right. I'd just like to say, once again, thank you for having me. And it's a good thing you and I are not neighbors, because when I listen to Get Off My Lawn, I realize you and I would just bullshit all day long because we agree on everything. And that's probably a bad thing. And I think our wives would be very happy we're not neighbors.
Yeah, I appreciate the shameless plug. And again, this is Tim. This is Anthony. This is On the Mic. You know what? We are out of here. As always, that was a great On the Mic segment. Thank you, Anthony, for coming on. If you want to come on the mic with me here at Giants New York Straight Talk, just send me an email at tim@onlineBigBlue.com, tim@onlineBigBlue.com, and we'll have you come in. We'll give you those 10 minutes on the mic, and you could do what you wish to do. I don't think we have another show coming up for a week or two, so you know what? Hope everyone has a great weekend. Hope everyone has a be safe. Sit there and understand the fact that we are all fans, but you're allowed to have a difference of an opinion. And those that have a different opinion than you know what? Let them have their opinion because you have yours, and let's just kind of meet in the middle. Again, this is Tim. This is New York Giants Straight Talk, and I'm out of here.